Chosen one, heaven has a specific message for you today, not tomorrow, not when you feel more ready, but right now, in this exact moment, you are watching this. There is something God decided you need to know today, and this message reached you in this form, at this moment, because the timing was not chosen by you. Stay with these words, because what heaven wants you to know today may completely change how you live the next days, weeks, and chapter of your life. Type Amen in the comments if you believe heaven has a specific message for you today and you are ready to receive it. You did not land on this video by accident, and what I'm about to share is going to show you exactly why. I remember a specific Tuesday, not a birthday, not a new year, not a moment marked on any calendar, just an ordinary Tuesday where I received one of the most transformative messages of my life, not dramatically, but with a precision so specific to what I was carrying in that moment that there was no way to call it coincidence. What I learned that day is that heaven does not need a grand setting to say something important. It only needs someone willing to stop long enough to listen. Drop a like right now. This simple action helps carry this message to another chosen one who needs to hear exactly what heaven wants them to know today. There is a deeply human tendency to live either in the past that has already gone or in the future that has not yet arrived, and in doing so to miss entirely the present that is actually happening. Today becomes nothing more than a bridge between where you were and where you want to be, a transitional space that carries no significance of its own, something to get through rather than something to inhabit with intention. But heaven has a completely different perspective on today. It sees the present not as transition but as territory, not as a gap between meaningful moments, but as a meaningful moment in itself, carrying its own weight, its own opportunities, and its own specific assignments that will not be available in any other form on any other day. The chosen one who grasps this, who stops treating today as merely the day before tomorrow and starts treating it as a specific, unrepeatable, genuinely significant territory, will find that what each day produces changes dramatically in response to the quality of attention and intention they bring to it. I spent years living accidentally, waking without intention about the day, reacting to whatever appeared, arriving at night with the consistent sense that the day had happened to me rather than that I had happened to the day. There was always a vague plan for the future and a clear memory of the past, but the present was treated as a kind of administrative space where I waited for the meaningful moments that I had decided were coming later. What shifted was not a dramatic revelation, but a simple realization. Today is a concession, not a guarantee. This day specifically was given rather than owed, and treating it as such changed the weight I assigned to what I did with it. The chosen one who lives from this awareness will find that the texture of their daily life changes, not because the circumstances become more impressive, but because the attention they bring to ordinary circumstances allows those circumstances to produce what they were always capable of producing but couldn't, while being treated as insignificant. The decisions you make today matter, not only as causes that will produce effects tomorrow, but as expressions of who you currently are and what you currently believe, which shape the person you are becoming in ways that accumulate invisibly but compound significantly over time. The conversations you have today carry weight. The posture you bring to what you are currently facing carries weight. The small choices about what you give your attention to, what you allow to occupy the space of your thinking, what you decide to believe about your situation in this specific moment, all of it carries weight that extends beyond what you can calculate from inside today. The chosen one who treats today as territory rather than transition will discover that each day, approached with this quality of awareness, contributes to a trajectory that ordinary accidentally lived days simply cannot build. Because trajectory is built from the accumulation of intentional days, and intentional days begin with the recognition that today, specifically, is not just another day. So here is the invitation that this truth carries, not as a demand for perfect productivity or relentless intentionality, but as a genuine reorientation of how you relate to the day you are currently in. How are you treating today? With the attention that a day that will never repeat itself deserves, with the awareness that what you do with this specific territory is being observed, is being built into something larger than you can see from inside it, and is contributing to a story that requires each of its days to be genuinely inhabited rather than merely survived. The chosen one who asks this question honestly and answers it with the kind of self-awareness that produces real adjustment rather than comfortable acknowledgement will find that today, This specific, ordinary, unremarkable-looking day becomes one of the days they can point to later as the one where something shifted in how they showed up for their own life. Type 777. If you receive the truth that today is not just another day, it is a territory that heaven is watching with intention. There is a specific optical illusion that happens to the chosen one who has been in the middle of a long process. The persistent sense that the destination is as far away as it was at the beginning, that the accumulated effort has produced no measurable movement toward what they are working and believing toward. This illusion is not the result of actual stagnation, it is the result of perspective. When you are close to something, your proximity to it prevents you from seeing it clearly. The person who is furthest from the destination has the clearest view of how far it is. The person who is closest to it often cannot see it at all because they are too near to it to have the visual distance required for accurate assessment. The chosen one, in the middle of a long process, who concludes from their inability to see the destination that the destination is not approaching, has made an error not of faith, but of geometry. They have confused the limitation of their current vantage point with the reality of their actual position. A mentor told me something years ago that reoriented how I evaluated my own progress, and I have returned to it consistently enough across different seasons of my life that its reliability has been established beyond the level of inspiring phrase into the level of operational truth. He said, "You cannot see the progress you are making for the same reason you cannot see your own face without a mirror. You are too close to it." That sentence changed how I related to seasons where the movement felt invisible. I stopped measuring my progress by what I could see and started trusting the process I knew was happening, even when it produced no externally verifiable evidence that it was producing anything. The chosen one who develops this capacity to trust the process even when the process produces no visible output will navigate long seasons of apparent stagnation with a steadiness that the evidence-dependent version of their faith could never sustain. You are closer today than you were yesterday, closer than you were last month, closer than you were in the year that has passed. And heaven wants you to know this specifically today, because the perception of proximity changes how you move. It changes the quality of your confidence, the steadiness of your faith, and the specific energy with which you continue doing what you are doing in the direction you are moving. The chosen one who believes they are close moves differently from the one who believes the destination is still as distant as it was at the beginning. They carry less of the weight of futility. They invest more of their available energy into the next step rather than into the question of whether the next step is worth taking. And that difference in how they move is itself one of the factors that determines how quickly the remaining distance is covered. If you could see your own journey from the perspective of heaven, not just the external circumstances, but the internal development, the character growth, the faith that has been built, the healing that has happened, the patterns that have shifted, you would be surprised by how far you have come from where you started. The progress that you cannot account for externally is real. The movement that has happened in dimensions you cannot measure is genuine. And the distance that remains between where you currently are and where you are going is significantly smaller than your current perspective is allowing you to calculate. The chosen one who receives this truth today will find that something in how they carry the rest of this day changes, not because their circumstances changed, but because their perception of where those circumstances are taking them did. There is one of the most specifically lonely experiences available to a human being: to pray sincerely, repeatedly, over a long period of time, and to receive no visible evidence that anything is being heard. It is a loneliness that is qualitatively different from ordinary loneliness because it occurs in the place that was supposed to be the site of greatest connection, in the activity that was supposed to be the most direct line of communication between the person praying and the one being prayed to. The silence that follows prayer in those seasons does not feel like ordinary silence. It feels like a specific, targeted silence that communicates something about the availability or the attentiveness of the one who is supposed to be receiving what is being sent. And the chosen one who spends enough time in that specific silence without the framework to understand what it actually means will begin constructing a theology around it, a set of conclusions about prayer, about God's availability, and about their own standing that the silence itself was never designed to produce, but that confusion and exhaustion consistently generate in the absence of a more accurate interpretation. I developed a theology of prayer during a season of apparent silence that was wrong in ways I did not recognize until I encountered something that reorganized everything. I concluded that silence meant absence, that the gap between my prayer and any visible response was evidence of either God's inattention or my own insufficient faith, and that the solution was to pray more, to pray better, to find the right words, or the right posture, or the right level of faith that would finally break through whatever was blocking the connection. What I did not understand was that I had confused two things that are completely separate: the hearing and the manifestation. God hears the first time. He heard before you finished asking. He heard the prayer you prayed before you found the words for it. The delay is never in the hearing. It is always in the timing of the manifestation, which is governed by variables that have nothing to do with the quality of the prayer or the faith of the one praying. Every prayer you have prayed has been heard, not the ones that felt most articulate, not the ones you prayed with the greatest sense of faith, not the ones that seemed to have the most spiritual momentum behind them. Every prayer, including the ones you prayed at your lowest moments when the words were barely coherent, including the ones you prayed at 3 a.m. when you were not entirely sure what you were asking for, including the ones you prayed and then immediately doubted had reached anywhere. The chosen one who genuinely receives this, who allows it to move from theological statement to operational belief, will find that their relationship with prayer changes fundamentally, not because prayer produces different results immediately, but because they are no longer relating to the silence as evidence of abandonment. They are relating to it as the space between the transmission and the manifestation, which is a completely different experience of the same silence. Heaven wants you to know today that the prayers you have prayed over the longest seasons of your life, the ones that seem to have accumulated without producing visible return, the ones you have almost stopped praying because the repetition without apparent result has begun to feel like evidence of futility, have been received, are being held, and are being answered on a timeline that is governed by wisdom rather than urgency. The chosen one who receives this truth today will approach prayer differently going forward, not as a mechanism they are trying to operate correctly in order to produce results, but as a conversation with someone who is already listening, already involved, and already working on what they are bringing. The silence is not the sound of God's absence. It is the sound of something being prepared in a dimension that precedes the visible, and what is being prepared is arriving on exactly the schedule that wisdom, rather than impatience, would choose. If you have ever wondered if your prayers were truly heard, type "every prayer was heard" down below as a declaration of faith today. There are things in the life of a chosen one that appear to be permanently gone, relationships that ended without resolution, opportunities that slipped away before they could be held, versions of themselves that seemed to disappear under the weight of difficult experiences, dreams that were placed in a drawer so deep that the location of the drawer was eventually forgotten. And the specific grief of these apparent losses is not identical to ordinary grief, because ordinary grief knows what it is, mourning. This grief exists in a kind of uncertainty, not entirely sure whether what seems gone is actually gone, or simply unavailable in its previous form, not entirely sure whether to continue believing for something that all available evidence suggests has passed, not entirely sure whether the faith it would take to keep believing is genuine trust, or the specific denial of someone who has not yet accepted a reality that should be accepted. The chosen one who has been living in that uncertainty, carrying the weight of something that seems lost, without having been able to conclusively determine whether it is lost or simply hidden, needs to hear what heaven wants to say about this today, with more clarity than the uncertainty of the experience has been allowing. I had a dream that I considered dead for nearly 5 years, something I had carried for a long time, had genuinely believed was mine to pursue, and had eventually set aside with the conviction that the window had closed, that the timing had passed, and that certain things were simply not going to happen for me in the form I had originally imagined them. I moved forward without it, not bitterly, but with a kind of resigned acceptance that I told myself was maturity. And then, through a sequence of events I could not have designed or predicted, it returned, not in the form I had originally imagined, but in a form that was better, more aligned with who I had become, more suited to the context my life had developed into. What I learned from that experience was something that reorganized how I relate to apparent losses. What God places inside you does not die simply because you stop believing in it for a season. It waits. It is preserved. And it returns in the form and the timing that are right, rather than in the form and the timing that you originally calculated. The chosen one who has placed something in the category of lost needs to consider today the possibility that the category is wrong, that what appears lost is actually paused, preserved, being held in a form that is not yet visible, but that is more intact than the experience of its absence has been suggesting. This is not a call to naive denial of genuine endings. Some things do end, some seasons do close, and wisdom includes the ability to recognize genuine conclusion when it arrives. But the specific things that God placed in you, the dreams that came from somewhere deeper than ambition, the callings that persisted beyond the seasons where they would have made logical sense to abandon, the desires that kept returning even after you had made peace with their apparent impossibility, those are not subject to the same rules as ordinary losses. They belong to a category of promise that outlasts the seasons in which they seem most absent. So here is the question. Heaven is asking you to consider today about what you have filed in the category of lost. What did you place in the drawer? What did you stop believing for, not because you chose to stop, but because the evidence accumulated to a point where continuing to believe felt irresponsible? What still pulses quietly when you become still enough to feel it? The thing you told yourself you had moved on from, but that never entirely stopped registering as real. Because that thing, the one that persists despite your best efforts to make peace with its apparent absence, may be exactly what heaven has been preserving for the moment, and the form that are right rather than the moment and the form that you originally imagined. The chosen one who reopens that drawer today, even tentatively, even with the self-protection of someone who has been disappointed before, will find that what they discover there is more alive than the years of apparent absence suggested it had any right to be. The week you just lived, with everything it contained of challenge, of pressure, of moments that nobody witnessed, of battles fought in silence, of choices that cost more than the people around you could begin to imagine, was seen, not partially, not selectively, not only in the moments that were visible to others, or that you were able to articulate to someone who asked how you were doing. Every detail of it was witnessed with full attention and full understanding by a presence that does not have blind spots, does not have limited access, and does not require you to explain what something cost you in order to understand that it cost you something real. The chosen one who has been carrying the specific weight of a week that nobody fully saw needs to hear this today, not as religious comfort designed to make the weight feel smaller, but as accurate information about who was present in every moment of that week, including the ones that felt most unwitnessed and most alone. There was a week in my life that I have never been able to fully describe to anyone, not because it was too dramatic to put into words, but because it was made of the kind of accumulation that resists simple narration. No single event that would have made a compelling story. Just a compounding of small pressures arriving simultaneously from multiple directions, each individually manageable, but collectively producing a weight that was genuinely difficult to carry without showing it in ways I was trying not to show. I moved through that week performing functionality for everyone around me while internally navigating something that had no clean edges and no obvious solution. What sustained me was not a breakthrough moment or a clear sign that things were improving. It was a quiet, persistent certainty that the week was being witnessed, that the invisible effort was being counted by someone who had complete access to what I was actually carrying, regardless of what I was visibly presenting. That certainty did not remove the difficulty, but it changed the experience of carrying it in a way that I still find difficult to fully articulate. Heaven does not have a selective viewing policy that captures only the highlights and misses the ordinary difficult moments in between. It does not see the chosen one only in their moments of faith eloquence, visible victory, or publicly witnessed effort. It sees the week, the whole week, including the parts that will never be mentioned in any conversation, including the choices made in private that cost something real, including the moments of continuing when stopping would have been easier and nobody would have known the difference. The exhaustion that you carried into certain days of this past week was seen. The specific loneliness of facing something that you could not fully explain to the people around you was seen. The choice you made, in a moment that felt completely unwitnessed, to keep going rather than give in to what was pulling you towards something easier, was seen, was registered, and was not treated as insignificant, simply because no human audience was present for it. You were seen this week, and heaven wants you to know this today because the knowledge of being seen changes how you carry what comes next. There is a specific quality of endurance available to the chosen one who knows their effort is being witnessed, that is simply not available to the one who believes they are carrying what they carry in complete invisibility. Not because the witnessing makes the effort easier, but because it makes it meaningful in a way that unwitnessed effort cannot be, because meaning is one of the primary sources of the energy required to continue, and the chosen one, who knows that nothing they do in pursuit of their purpose is invisible to the one who placed that purpose in them, will find that they have access to reserves of endurance that the belief in invisibility consistently cuts off before they can be drawn upon. Type "I was seen" this week in the comments if you receive the truth that heaven witnessed everything you went through and nothing was overlooked. There is a belief that installs itself silently in the mind of the chosen one who has been through a difficult season, made a significant mistake, or spent an extended period without visible evidence of divine response. The belief that God's love for them has diminished, that the access they once had has been compromised, that the warmth they once experienced has been replaced by a cooler, more conditional presence that is waiting for them to do something specific before restoring what their failure or their absence or their inconsistency interrupted. This belief almost never announces itself as a theological position. It operates beneath the level of conscious thought, expressing itself in the specific hesitation with which the chosen one approaches prayer, in the distance they maintain from the intimacy they once had, in the sense that they need to resolve something, or demonstrate something, or become something, before they can return to the kind of closeness that characterized earlier seasons of their relationship with God. It feels like humility. It presents itself as appropriate accountability for what happened, but beneath both of those presentations, it is a lie. One of the most consequential and most persistently damaging lies available, because it operates in the one relationship where its damage is most comprehensive and most far-reaching. I believed this lie for a season of my life, and I want to describe what it looked like in practice, because the description may be more useful to you than a theological refutation of the idea. I continued praying, but with a quality of approach that was different from what had preceded the season of failure and distance. I was more careful, more formal, more aware of the gap between who I was presenting myself to be and who I knew I had been in the period I was trying to move past. I approached the relationship with a kind of contractual awareness, a sense that I was working my way back to something rather than simply returning to what had always been available. And what I did not recognize while I was inside that posture was how much it was costing me, how the distance I was maintaining in the name of appropriate humility was actually preventing me from receiving the very thing that would have resolved the shame and the sense of separation that was producing the distance in the first place. The return I was working toward had been available the entire time. I was the one creating the delay by refusing to simply come back without first completing the penance I had assigned myself. God's love for you today is identical to what it was before your most recent failure, identical to what it was before the most difficult season you have been through, identical to what it was before anything that you believe changed the terms of your standing before Him. This is not a statement that minimizes the reality of failure or the importance of genuine repentance. Both of those things are real and matter, but the love itself, the specific, personal, non-negotiable love that God has for the chosen one He created and called, is not reactive to your performance in the way that human love inevitably is. It does not increase when you perform well and decrease when you fail. It does not warm when you are consistent and cool when you are not. It is constant in a way that has no genuine human parallel, which means that the chosen one who tries to understand it through the framework of human relational experience will consistently underestimate it and relate to it as more conditional than it actually is. So here is what heaven wants you to do with this truth today. Not just agree with it intellectually, not just add it to the category of things you know are theologically true, without allowing it to change anything about how you actually approach the relationship. Receive it. Let it move from the level of concept into the level of felt reality by bringing whatever created the sense of distance directly into the presence of the one whose love was never actually affected by it. The chosen one who does this, who stops performing the penance they assigned themselves and simply returns, will find that what greets them is not the cooler, more conditional presence that their shame had led them to expect, but the same love that was always there, unchanged, undiminished, and completely unimpressed by the distance they had been maintaining as if it were somehow protecting God from something he had not already fully seen and fully absorbed into a love that was never contingent on them being anything other than exactly what they are. After everything heaven came to say today, there is a response being waited for. Not a perfect response, not an elaborate one, but a real one. The kind that comes from someone who genuinely heard what was said and decides in this specific day to move differently because of it. The most transformative messages are not the ones that produce the strongest emotion in the moment of receiving them. They are the ones that produce the most genuine change in the days that follow. Emotion is real, and emotion matters, but emotion that does not translate into movement eventually dissipates without leaving behind the transformation that the message was designed to produce. The chosen one who hears something true and responds to it with genuine action, however small, however seemingly insignificant, participates in a process that produces lasting change. The one who hears something true and allows the feeling of having heard it to substitute for the response it was asking for, will find that the feeling fades and the opportunity to be changed by what they received fades with it. The messages that changed my life were not the ones that left me feeling the most inspired in the moment. They were the ones that produced a specific, concrete, identifiable shift in how I was actually living. A conversation I finally had that I had been avoiding. A weight I finally released that I had been carrying out of habit rather than necessity. A decision I finally made that I had been postponing because making it required me to accept something I had been resisting. A prayer I finally prayed, with the honesty and the openness that the previous versions of it had been protecting themselves from. Each of these responses was small in isolation. Each could have been dismissed as too minor to constitute a meaningful response to something significant. But each one was the specific movement that the message was asking for. And the accumulation of those specific movements over time is what the transformation actually consists of, because transformation is never a single dramatic event. It is the compounding result of small, genuine, specific responses to what has been heard. Heaven is asking you to do something specific today with what you received, not to let this be another piece of content consumed and moved past without the response that it was sent to produce. Identify one thing, one specific, concrete, actionable thing that will be different today because of what you heard. Not a list, not a plan, one thing. The conversation you will have that you have been avoiding. The prayer you will pray with full honesty rather than the managed version. The weight you will consciously release rather than continue carrying into another week. The decision you will make that you have been postponing. The person you will reach out to whose name appeared in your mind while you were receiving this message. One thing, and small enough to be done today, real enough to actually require something from you, specific enough that you will know whether you did it or not when the day ends. What is your one thing? Not the answer that sounds most spiritually impressive, the honest one, the real one, the one that actually reflects what shifted in you while you were receiving what heaven came to say today. Because it is in the response to that question, specific, concrete, genuinely yours, that the message of today transforms from something you heard into something that becomes part of who you are. The chosen one who identifies their one thing and does it will find that the day ends differently than it began, not because the circumstances changed, but because they did. And a chosen one who changes in response to what heaven says is a chosen one who is actively participating in the construction of the next chapter of their own story. One specific response at a time. Type what your one thing is in the comments today. What changes because of what heaven told you right now? Declare it. Write it. Let it be witnessed. Chosen one. Today was not an ordinary day, and what heaven came to deliver was not a generic message for a generic audience. Today matters. You are closer than you think. Your prayers were heard. What seems lost is not lost. You were seen this week. God's love for you has not changed. And there is one specific response being waited for that will turn what you heard into movement. Close your eyes and say it out loud. Heaven, I received what you came to say today. I will not let this pass without response. I take one step forward today because of what I heard. Thank you for speaking. I am listening. Amen. If this reached you today, it wasn't by accident. Drop a like. It helps this word find another chosen one who needs to hear exactly what heaven wants them to know today. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because heaven does not speak only once. What's coming next is for those ready to keep listening, keep receiving, and keep moving into everything prepared for their next season. One word, Tell me what heaven told you today. I read every single one.